Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to another story time with Gythia, Sheila, McNallen. Not long ago, I read you the story of the hat, a cute story, but a silly story about animals. This one's going to be far more real. It could actually happen. Maybe. It's a mystery story, an adventure story about a little boy and a very special person in his life who's his grandfather, and the adventure they have together. It takes place in the far north in the middle of winter. In fact, I think it was probably January, as I will tell you why at the very end of the story. My story is called The Fiddler of the Northern Lights by Leslie Bowman. Take a look at those pictures. See the colors? I read in the news today that there's a chance that some of you, those of you who live in the north or up in Canada or up in Alaska, might actually see the northern lights tonight. It won't look like the moon or the stars or clouds. It'll look like waves of color across the sky moving gently. And it is called the Northern Lights. And this is what it could look like. Our story begins. Far to the north, where wolves howl at the moon, and the stars hang so low and bright, it seems as if you could hop from one to the other like rocks in a stream, the old folks say that strange and wondrous things sometimes happen. The Pepin family lived in the North Woods along the wild St. Maurice River. Mama, Papa, Armand, Alice, and Henry, who was 8 years old. So far, nothing strange or wondrous had happened to Henry, but he knew something might, because Grandpa Pepin had told him so. Who do you think that is? There we go. Henry loved the little cabin in the wild, tumbling river that was never out of ear or out of mind. But most of all, he loved when Grandpa Pepin came whistling through the woods for a visit. The dark winter days didn't seem so long or so lonely when Grandpa Pepin was there, telling his stories of the North Woods, legends he'd heard as a boy, of the great white owl, the Le Bout Blanc, or the terrible loup-garou, half man and half wolf. There's the owl. There's the loup-garou. Take a look at this picture. Some of Grandpa's stories were scary and some were not, but Henry knew them all by heart. Did you know that rabbits come out to dance on moonlit nights? Henry asked Armand when they were ice fishing at the trout holes. Who told you that? Armand said. Grandpa Pepin. Grandpa Pepin is just making that up, Armand said. Don't believe any of his stories. There are the boys fishing through the ice. You know what makes the Northern Lights dance? Henry asked Mamma and Elise when they were carrying in armloads of wood. Mamma and Elise didn't know. Magic, said Henry. And the fiddler. Fiddler? Elise asked. When Grandpa was a boy, Henry said, the old folk of the village told of a fiddler who lives where the Northern Lights are born. And when he plays his fiddle, he rouses the lights from sleep and they dance to his music. Oh, Henry, said Mamma, that's just some of Grandpa's stories. Henry ran all the way to Grandpa's cabin. The fiddler is real, isn't he, Grandpa? Why, of course he is, Grandpa said, but most people never see him. I wish I could see him, Henry said. Couldn't we look for him sometime, just you and me? Grandpa's thinking. The next night, Grandpa brought skates he'd made from wood and barrel hoops. "We're going on an adventure," Grandpa said. "At night?" Henry asked. "Sure," said Grandpa. "Night is the best time for adventure, when there's a touch of magic in the air." "Going, Grandpa?" "To look for the fiddler," said Grandpa. Take a look at this. Henry and Grandpa strapped the skates to their boots and swooped up the frozen river. The forest and the sky seemed so large and dark, like the mouth of the terrible loup-garou, half man, half wolf, ready to swallow them. Henry skated very close to Grandpa. "Have you ever seen the fiddler?" Henry asked. "Not yet," said Grandpa, "but maybe we will tonight." The frozen river was black and smooth like a mirror. Stars glittered in the ice. Henry skated from one to the other, following the stars north. You can actually see the stars in the sky, too, reflected in the river. Look. The fiddler must be playing," Grandpa said. "See, the northern lights are beginning to dance." The ice shone with the colors of the sky, purple and red and green. Henry and Grandpa skated for miles on that ribbon of sparkling, dancing light. They're actually on the ice. The ice is the color of the northern lights. Take a look. Henry had never been so far up the river. Once or twice he thought he heard music, but he never saw the fiddler. Finally, Grandpa stopped. "Oh, I'll just rest for a few minutes," Grandpa said. He sat down and closed his eyes. He looks old, Henry thought. Henry watched the lights fade, and the river became just a river again, black and smooth. Henry felt tired, too, and a little sad. The fiddler must have just been one of Grandpa's stories after all. "We should be getting home," Grandpa said. "They'll be wondering where we are. I'm sorry we didn't find the fiddler." It was very late before they got back home. Mama gave them both some hot tea and a good scolding. "You had us worried sick," Mama said. "Where were you?" "Oh, I'm sorry, Angeline," Papa said tiredly. "We shouldn't have gone so far up the river." "We went to find the fiddler," Henry said. "Oh, Pa," Mama said to Grandpa, "I never want to hear another one of your wild stories." There was a knock at the door. "Mercy," said Mama. "Who else could be out so late on such a cold night?" So there they are having their tea, and there is who's at the door. A stranger stood in the darkness. His long white beard hung down to his waist, and his blue eyes sparkled like stars. Under one arm he carried a long black box. "It's out playing tonight, and I was hoping to warm myself by your fire." Papa told him to come on in, and Mama fixed him some hot tea, too. "What were you playing?" Henry asked. "My fiddle," the stranger said. "Would you like to hear it?" Henry and Grandpa smiled at each other. "We sure would," said Grandpa. The stranger opened the box and picked up a black fiddle that gleamed in the firelight. Look at that. There they are. We followed the lights up the river, Henry said. Can you make them come out again tonight? The fiddler lifted his fiddle to his chin, and he began to play. Again, there he is. Oh my, look at that. The song that poured from the fiddle was as sweet and clear as a mountain stream. As it flowed out into the night, filling up the dark spaces of the sky, the northern lights began to dance. People began to gather around the cabin, neighbors coming from up and down the river. No one in all the wild St. Maurice had ever heard such music, and all who listened knew that they would never hear such music again. The bright lights leaped from the darkness, spinning and twirling like dancers in their finest gowns, and when the neighbors saw how the lights swayed to the music, they were frightened. "Don't be afraid," the fiddler said. "I shall play my fiddle, and you shall dance all night." Here they are. Soon people filled the cabin to bursting. Chairs and stools were pushed aside to make a dancing floor. The walls rattled with the thumping of feet and the fiddler's music, while the northern lights burned overhead. On and on he played, all through the night, until they could dance no more. Look at those happy people enjoying the time together. The music slowed as sad and lonesome as a wolf howl, and when it stopped, the lights took one last bow, and then they were gone. "The sun will soon be rising," the fiddler said. "The dance is over, and I must be on my way." He turned toward the north, and Grandpa and Henry watched as he disappeared into the woods. There's the fiddler. "Off to bed with you," Mama said, hugging Henry, and then she hugged Grandpa too. "Pa, I'll never say another word about your wild stories," she said. "You know," Grandpa said, "I didn't believe my wild stories either until now." And they all laughed. Henry never saw the fiddler again. And here they are at night. But to this day, when the northern lights are sweeping across the sky, there are old folk along the St. Maurice River who say that when the wind is just right, you can hear the sound of a fiddle. As for Grandpa's other stories, well, Henry still hasn't seen the rabbits dance, but on moonlit nights he fills his pockets with carrots, just in case. And there are the rabbits. All right. So, everybody, I want you to think about this. If this was a January story, it sure sounds like Thora Bloat to me. That is what we celebrate in January. We come together, sometimes in our homes and sometimes at our hofs, and we eat well, and we play games, and we listen to music, and we might even dance like the people here in this story. If you don't celebrate Thora Bloat with your family, do it next year. Plan it next year so that you can have a night like those people who had the gift of the fiddler who came out of the woods, played the fiddle, and gave them the northern lights. If you see the northern lights tonight, listen for the fiddle. You might just hear it in the wind and the trees. And as for the fiddler, in our own story, in our own lore, with our god Odin, Odin is a shape changer. He doesn't always have to look as if We see him with one eye. He might have two blue eyes. He could have a long white beard. He could be playing the fiddle because Odin can be where he wants and do what he wants. And he might just come around to play the fiddle and bring the northern lights overhead over your homes so you can enjoy January like they did in this story, The Fiddler of the Northern Lights. Ask your parents about the Northern Lights. There really is a science reason for it, but I love the magical reason for this. Nothing like having a fiddler play music in the middle of winter. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you liked it. Again, it's one of my favorites. I hope you remember it and tell your own children about the Fiddler of the Northern Lights if you ever see them. Thanks, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.